Well, welcome to Ziegenfuss University, and this is Monday of Holy Week, and we have a very special lecture today. It's based on, I don't know, a sermon I did like 5 or 6 or 10 years ago, and I always wanted to get it on video because it's really important. So let's go to work on this thing. And we have a whole hour to develop it, so it's going to be really interesting. First of all, what day is it today? Monday of Holy Week. So yesterday was Palm Sunday. Today, according to the chronology found in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus goes into the temple. Remember, he leaves the temple after the Palm Sunday and goes back to Bethany. He returns the next day and he does the cleansing of the temple. So it's really useful when you go through Holy Week to meditate and think about this. So on Monday, he does the cleansing of the temple. Tuesday, there's a day of controversy and parables. Wednesday, we don't quite know what happened on Wednesday. Thursday is the Passover and the Last Supper event. Good Friday, of course, is the crucifixion. And Saturday, he's in the tomb. And Sunday, of course, is Easter Sunday. So that's the events of Holy Week. And we have our special services. We could do services Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but we don't. So instead we have Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Vigil Saturday, and then Easter Sunday. So it's a good time to kind of think about the life of Christ during this final week. So with that, let's go to work here. Now, we have this chart, and this is it's a diagram. I gave this out when I did the sermon like 10 years ago. And so you want to save this, right? There's good stuff in here. And what's in the chart? This is a logic chart, and it's based on, did Jesus die on the cross? If he didn't die, so either he died or he didn't die. Then you take the next step over. If he died, what happened to him? He was buried. If that happened, then what happened? How come the tomb was empty? So it's based on the logical arguments that you might be able to construct if it's a true historical event. Okay? Like, what happened to Pastor Mark today? I think he went to Walmart. Well, no, did we see any witnesses over there? We don't know if he went to Walmart. Well, if he didn't go to Walmart, where did he go? He might have gone to Dollar General, or he could have taken a nap. So in other words, you can only do one thing at one time. So this whole idea is based on, okay, if he didn't do this, then he did that. If he did this, what would happen after that? So it's flow of logic here. Now, before we do this logic chart, I want to direct your attention to the minimal facts argument. And what's this? This is Apologetics, Defense of the Christian Religion. And there's a professor, Gary Habermas, and he's a professor at Liberty University, and he spent about 40 years studying the death, burial, resurrection of Christ. And he's read hundreds and hundreds of books. He wrote this book. It's still being published, Evidences of the Resurrection, and it's volume 1. Volume 1 is like 600 or 800 pages with like thousands of footnotes. Basically, the guy has devoted his life to studying this whole subject. He's read everything for it, everything against it, all the evidence. So kind of a good resource. And when he lays out his argument, he says, okay, we're not going to get people who are skeptical to believe that 2 angels appeared in the empty tomb. So instead, what are the minimal facts, right? Just the minimal facts, like the stuff that even people who are skeptics will accept. Just, minimal facts. Okay, so let's start right here at the top of the list. First of all, Jesus of Nazareth, did he exist? Now, why is that an important fact to know?
Well, if he didn't, then we're...
If he didn't exist, it's kind of silly, isn't it?
Yeah.
So right now we have about 2 billion Christians in the world. Well, we're like wasting our time here if there was no person named Jesus. Now, is it difficult to find people who would say that Jesus didn't exist? Well, this started during the Enlightenment, late 19th century in Germany, where there are actually people that said, no, Jesus didn't exist, drunken monks made it up, it's a myth or a legend. Now, if someone said that to me, what do I do? Don't pan the camera. I have to grab this book over here. Where's my book? Here it is. This is my copy of Will Durant, The Story of Civilization. This is an 11-volume set. He started writing this in 1929, and he finished the last volume on Napoleon in 1975. And he would have kept the project going, but he was getting old. Lived over here in Connecticut, and he read 3,000 books before the age of 19. He was educated among the Jesuits, and he would be, I don't know, like a democratic socialist kind of a person, right? And I really like him. I've learned a lot from him over the years. I actually have read this entire 11-volume set. That's why I know a lot about history. His famous book is called The Story of Philosophy. Okay? Now, what's the name of this book? It was published in 1944. This is volume 3 in the 11-volume set, 1944. It's called Caesar and what?
Christ.
Caesar and Christ. Now, Will Durant is not a Christian. He's sort of like, he's a historian. So about half this book deals with Christ. Now, if Christ didn't exist, Will Durant would have been the first one to tell you that it's a myth or a legend somebody made up, right? So the fact that there's a volume called, do people believe that Julius Caesar exists?
Yes.
There's actually more evidence that Christ exists than there is that Julius Caesar existed, right? So this is kind of an interesting book. I would invite people, read this book. It's just the historical part, and there's no religion axe grinding here. It's just okay, so yes, he did exist. Sometimes people say it was a myth, okay? Now, is it a myth? C.S. Lewis, what did he write? Mere Christianity, Chronicles of Narnia. He's an Inkling, right? That was a literary group that met at Cambridge University or Oxford. I get the two mixed up. And who was one of his friends and companions? Tolkien, who wrote, what? The Lord of the Rings series? Tolkien and C.S. Lewis are experts in mythology and legends of the Middle Ages. That's their thing in life. Okay? They study, Beowulf and all related English myths and so on. Now, in his book, Mere Christianity, he also wrote an essay on what makes something a myth. He says there's not enough time for a myth or a legend to develop between the time that Christ died on the cross, the resurrection event, and when people started talking about it as if it was a fact. It was a matter of days where this happened. Typically, a myth or a legend takes, a long time to develop. Paul Bunyan, Paul Bunyan stories in the North Woods in Minnesota. It took, like a century for these myths to develop. I like the Paul Bunyan story where he was really fast. How fast was he? He was so fast he could blow out a candle and be in bed before the room got dark. That's fast. So a story like that takes time to develop. It doesn't just pop up, like one day, okay? So the idea that, did Christ exist? The answer is yes, he exists. So that's the foundational assumption, that Jesus is. And the date we use, 7 BC to 33 AD. Again, why do we do that? It's a 3-hour lecture. Why I think that's a good date. And I've been using that date, for a long time. It's based on, like 30 years of scholarship on that. Number 2, here's a minimal fact. Jesus died due to the effects of Roman crucifixion. Okay? So, first of all, he lived and he died. Now, if you want to know about Roman crucifixion, what's a good book to read? This book here, Martin Hengel. He's a German scholar from the 20th century. This book is called Crucifixion. It's about this thick, right? It's all about crucifixion. Now, if you said, Jesus died of being electrocuted in the electric chair, right? Or he was given a lethal injection after being on death row and having appealed for 25 years, what would you say about that?
Not true.
Well, why though?
Because the Bible doesn't say that.
Well, yeah, that's the right answer, believe it or not. But it's the wrong, execution method for the time of the Romans.
True, yeah, too.
Like we know the Romans didn't do electrocution and they didn't do death. So if someone said Jesus died from a lethal injection, you would say, well, it's the 2,000 years out of That doesn't work. So, did the Romans use crucifixion? The answer is yes. He has one chapter in here called Crucifixion as the Supreme Roman Penalty. Okay? So we know the Romans crucified people. How do we know? How do we know that it isn't just drunken monks making it up? Well, they were putting in a sewer line or digging an apartment basement or something in Jerusalem back in around 1968. They found an ossuary box. What's that? It's a box that contains the bones of people, right? That's the way they buried people in Jerusalem in the first century. And they found a heel bone with a nail driven through it. And what do you mean? The victim in the ossuary box was a victim of crucifixion from the Romans, right? So is it Jesus or something? No, it's just some poor Jewish guy that got crucified, and his family collected the body and buried it, and the nail was still in it, right? So in other words, yes, he died from crucifixion. And we have Bible verses here. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 5, we can look this up if you want. I'll do this one. I try to put the Bible verses in as often as possible because well, Christina's right, the Bible said so, right? That's a 3-hour lecture. Why can you believe the Bible? All right, this is Matthew chapter 28, verse 5. The angel said to the women at the empty tomb, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you were looking for Jesus who was crucified." Okay, got that? So the angel says, the Bible says he was crucified. Okay, so that's a minimal fact. Number 3, he was buried in a private tomb, and the tomb was owned by a high-status Sanhedrin member named Joseph of Arimathea, and the Bible tells us that the tomb had never been occupied before. Just like Jesus rides on the donkey that's never been ridden on before, okay? And this is Luke chapter 23, verses 50 through 52. Joseph of Arimathea goes to Pontius Pilate and begs for the body of Jesus. Pilate, surprised Jesus is dead already, and gives Joseph of Arimathea the permission to take down the body, okay? Is that a big deal? Yes. Joseph of Arimathea, here's what the Romans do. They don't just arrest you. They arrest you and all of your supporters and your family and kill everybody. That's how you put down an insurrection in a deadly and efficient way. So if you go and say, "Can I have the body?" Oh, you're one of his followers. Kill him too. Okay? So Joseph of Arimathea, very interesting. So that's the burial. Afterwards, the apostles/disciples, again, remember 12 apostles, an unknown number of disciples, were discouraged and bereaved and fearful and despondent, having all previous hope destroyed. So remember, they're coming to Jerusalem because they think Jesus is going to be the political military Messiah, going to be a revolution, it's going to be, a wonderful victory. Instead, he's crucified, okay? And they watched him die. And they watched him being taken off the tomb, off the cross, and placed in the tomb. Would you be in a good mood after that? What did you just do? You gave up your fishing boat and the nets, and for the last 3.5 years you've been following Jesus around because he thought he was the Messiah, and instead he's dead. Yeah. In other words, wow. It's sort of like you're going to College of St. Rose and you've been there for 3.5 years and they closed the place just before you graduate. Wow, that's bad, okay? So that's what happens to them. So the bottom line, this is John chapter 20, verses 19 through 21. Are they in a position to say, let's put black stuff over our face and sneak up to the tomb and overpower the Roman guards and take the dead body of Jesus out and then go around and tell people that he rose from the dead? The answer would be no. Okay, these are fishermen who are depressed and think that it's the end of the story. Okay? So were they expecting Jesus to appear? The answer would be no. Okay? Despite the fact that he told them at least 3 times in the Synoptic Gospels that I must be killed and rise again on the 3rd. They didn't believe it until it really happened. The tomb, which Jesus was buried, was discovered empty soon after his interment. Remember? Death, burial, resurrection. So Easter Sunday morning at dawn, he appears to Mary Magdalene. That's Gospel of Mark 16 and John chapter 20. Also Salome and Mary, the mother of James, who were with Mary Magdalene. That's Matthew 28:9 through 10. So why would Jesus appear to the women?
Because he was smart.
No, this is called, right, this is called, in apologetics, this is called the criterion of embarrassment, right? If you were going to lie and make it up, you would have high-ranking government officials from the FBI and the State Department appearing at the tomb with a notary public to document their testimony. Instead, you have women at the tomb. And remember, it takes 2 or more Jewish men to convict somebody. The testimony of women is like, well, not so much. So in other words, you're leading with, not the strong punch, but the weak punch. The weak presentation, called the theory, right, of embarrassment, criterion of embarrassment. Okay? So the women appear and the tomb's empty. Now, is that a problem? The empty tomb's a problem, right? And we're going to see this when we go to our logic flow chart here, okay? With the consequence of that. The apostles, the minimum facts again. The apostles reported the experiences because they thought that he really rose from the dead, right? So they're convinced. The Road to Emmaus story, Luke chapter 24, 13 through 36, that we usually read that the second Sunday after Easter, where they're walking along on the road and they break the bread and then Jesus, appears to them, right? The teaching and proclamation of the resurrection of Christ and appearances took place very early after the apostles' experiences. In other words, this is a story of St. Thomas in the upper room. Okay, the shades are pulled down, and minimum fact stuff here. These experiences account for the apostles' and disciples' lives becoming transformed. Okay, so this is a huge thing. What happened to Peter? Peter's a fisherman, a working stiff dude. He denies Jesus 3 times. He's a man, a spineless wonder. And instead, all of a sudden, day of Pentecost, he's standing in front of the same people that yell, "Crucify him," and he's saying, "This Jesus that you crucified is risen from the dead." Suddenly, the guy developed he's like a lion now. Okay? Now, how do you explain that? Well, because they met the risen Lord. Okay? So that alone is a minimum facts thing. Number 9 here. The apostles and disciples report, preach, and teach that the resurrection took place in the city of Jerusalem. Okay? And he appeared before 500 brethren. This is 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15, starting with verses 1 through 20. Read that. It's Paul laying out the resurrection argument and story in great detail. We can do a whole... In fact, maybe I'll do that on Sunday morning. I'll do a whole sermon on just 1 Corinthians 15. It's very, very interesting. Number 11, the gatherings of the Christian community began approximately at the same time on the first day of the week. You ever wonder, why do Christians worship on Sunday rather than Saturday, which is the Sabbath day? 10 Commandments, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy? Well, that's called a major paradigm shift. Something happened to make people who believe in the Old Testament and the 10 Commandments to say, well, Sunday is the day that we gather to worship the Lord.
Because of the resurrection.
Well, yeah, because of the resurrection. And that's a fact. I mean, we worship on Sunday. I mean, why do we do that? Well, because every Sunday, this is St. Matthew 28:1, so on the first day of the week, right? So every Sunday is a mini Easter. That's a minimal fact. How do you explain Sunday? If Jesus is a myth, how do you explain people gathering to worship for 2,000 years on a Sunday? James, the brother of Jesus, is a skeptic and an unbeliever until after the resurrection. Then he becomes the bishop of Jerusalem, right? The brother of Jesus. So the book of James in the Bible is the brother of Jesus, but he didn't become a Christian until after the resurrection. That's 1 Corinthians 15, chapter 15, verse 7. A few years earlier, then Saul of Tarsus, St. Paul, is walking on the road to Damascus to kill Christians. Heinrich Himmler, looking for Jews, in other words. And on the way, the risen Lord appears to him, knocks him down. He's blind for 3 days in the tomb, and he reemerges as St. Paul, who goes around the world and propagates the Christian religion. He writes 13 books in the New Testament, and about 1/3 of the book of Acts is about Paul. Okay, so that's called the minimal facts argument. Okay, and the people agree with this. Like this isn't like, oh, that's controversial. No, it's like everyone agrees with this. Even people who aren't Christian would accept that. Okay, now with that background, let's start dealing with our logic flow chart. Okay, here we go. Let's start here. Remember, the main framework for this is DBR, death, burial, resurrection. DBR. Let's do the D. All right. Jesus is nailed to a cross. Okay? Nailed to a cross. We know that crucifixion takes up to 9 days for people to die on a cross. That's Flavius Josephus writes about this. Okay? And what happens? Your body weight is doubled, okay? And you have to stand on the nails in your feet in order to get a breath, and then you have to drop down in order to exhale. So what happens is you stand up, you're down. You stand up, you stand down. You stand up, you stand down. In the Jesus movies, he's just sort of hanging there, not doing anything. That's not accurate. Because if you don't stand up to breathe and drop yourself down to exhale, you suffocate. Okay? What did they do when the Romans came to the execution site before sundown on Friday, because it's going to be Passover? They didn't want the bodies hanging on the cross.
They broke the legs.
They broke the legs of the one on the right. They broke the legs of the one on the left. And what happened to those people?
They
They died.
Yeah. Within a minute or two, you would suffocate because you can't stand up to exhale. Okay? When they got to Jesus, what did they do?
They left him alone.
They stuck him under the 5th rib. Okay? Why is that? You have a lance like this. They're standing down here, and they stick you under the 5th rib. That's how you kill somebody in the Roman army. Right? Use the gladius sword. You can go down between the collarbone, right here, right down there, and kill somebody that way. Or you can stab them under the 5th rib, which goes right to your heart. In other words, it's a coup de grace. It's the death blow. Okay? So, and what happened? According to John chapter 18, verse 34, blood and water came out. Okay, what does that mean? John, who says he saw this, he eyewitnessed it himself, saw blood and water come out of the side. What does that mean? John didn't know what it meant, but we know what it means. What happens to a dead body after it's been sitting for 5 or 6 hours? The red blood cells coagulate, and if you puncture a dead body, water comes out. It looks like water, it's fluid, and clumped up, clotted red blood cells come out. Blood and water comes out. In other words, it's a death certificate, right? There's no coming back. If you get speared in the side and blood and water comes out, it means you've been dead for like 3 or 4 hours at that point, okay? So that is a powerful thing. D means dead. Is he really, really dead? Yeah, he's not faking it, right? The alternative would be he's not dead, okay? Well, what do you mean he's not dead? Well, this is called, there are several theories, but mostly it's called the swoon theory. Okay, what does that mean? That he's given a drug. You know, remember they put a hyssop branch on there with sour wine? He's given a drug, and it looks like he's dead, but he's not really dead. Right? And then Joseph of Arimathea comes along, and they take him down, and they revive him. You know, maybe they had one of those AED pads, you know, like shock him or something, and, you know. Well, is that a likely story? It's supported by the Quran. Believe it or not, the Quran says that Jesus didn't die on the cross. It's called the swoon theory. Okay?
That's not surprising.
Well, is that true? Okay, use your head. What did Joseph of Arimathea do when he took down the body from the cross?
Wrapped it up.
Yeah, but before he wrapped it up, what did he do?
Surely this was...
He put 100 pounds of spices on it.
Oh.
What would that do to you? You ever cut your finger when you're like in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Get a little paprika in there, maybe a little bit of Louisiana hot sauce in there. What does that feel like?
It burns.
Well, imagine if your whole back is ripped open, you have wounds in your side, the crown of thorns, the face beating, you're a bloody mess, and somebody's putting 100 pounds of spices on there.
Yeah, you would have jumped up.
Yeah, the shock alone would have killed you. And speaking of shock, when someone's been brutalized, traumatized by this, okay, you come up on a car accident, you see somebody in the car, what do you do with them?
Blanket over
You
them.
pull them out of the car to make sure the car's not on fire, and you wrap them up in a blanket so they don't go into shock. Do you take the person and lay them into a cold tomb on a slab? What does a cold rock slab do? It sucks the heat out of you. So the last thing you need as a trauma victim is to be laid on an ice cold slab. The shock alone, again, he's dead like multiple times over. Okay? And was Jesus scourged?
Yeah.
All right. Watch the Passion of the Christ. Okay? They cut it short. It was actually worse in real life than it is in the movie. And most people can't stand watching the movie. It goes on for like 10 minutes or something. Well, it would be like a 3 or 4 hour beating like that. Sometimes people actually died from that. Right? So, why do they give you like 40 lashes in the British Navy or something? Because if you go more than that, you can actually kill somebody, right? So he's beaten without limit, right? And the scourge, it has leather straps with little pieces of lead or glass in it so that when it hits, it rips your skin open, okay? So he's being tortured in the worst possible way, okay? And he was blindfolded when he was beaten. Well, what does that mean?
You can't
Yeah,
protect
if I was to punch you or slap you, you'd like brace yourself because you see it coming. But if you're blindfolded, you can't brace yourself. So in other words, the physiological damage is going to be a lot worse that way than it would be if you could brace yourself. In other words, so is it likely that he was dead? Yeah, he's really dead. I mean, really, really dead, like multiple times over. Okay, so you can't get away with saying, oh, he's not, and the Roman execution squad, 5 or 6 soldiers with a centurion in charge, are they experienced veterans at this? Mm-hmm. They probably have done this a lot, right? It's just another day for them. What happens to a Roman centurion and his soldiers when they come back and they didn't finish the job?
Mm. Not good.
They'll end up being killed in a heinous way. The Romans have law and order, peace and quiet, discipline in their legions. So they wouldn't put up with, oh, he was ordered to kill this person, crucify him, but they left before it was over. In other words, they'd be in big, big trouble. And are they willing to die for the sake of some Jew? No, they don't like Jews. Okay? So in other words, they're going to make sure he's really dead. That's why they stick him under the 5th rib. And the blood and water comes out. They know from experience, talk to somebody who is like an EMS person. Okay? Do they know a DB when they roll up on one? Yeah. Because they've done it for like 20 years. They know. Okay? Well, the same thing with these guys. These Roman soldiers are hardened, so he's really dead, death certificate and all this stuff.
Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
How can they even say that he had a drug? Because the Roman, they were after him for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, why would they not
See it
go ahead?
through.
I mean, that doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. Well, when you talk to people about this stuff, first of all, do you read the Bible? I read the Bible. Yeah, maybe they claim they read the Bible. Did they read the Bible? We know they're lying because the Bible takes like a lifetime of study. I read the Bible. And do you go to church? No, I don't. But I saw it on the History Channel. Or I read a book somewhere, about this, that The Passover Plot by Hugh Schoenfeld. That was a big book in the 1960s where he advocates the swoon theory. And why would you do that? Well, because people who are secular do not believe in the supernatural. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. So if you say, before you even begin the discussion, there's no God and no resurrection of the dead, well then you have to explain how come the Christian religion exists. So they come up with, stories that sound plausible to people who don't know anything. People that haven't studied the Bible or studied the evidence will, I always say, if you sit down if you're objective and open-minded and sit down and actually study the evidence, you're going to say, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
But if you don't bother to look at the evidence, that's what most people do. They don't bother to look at the evidence because they don't believe in God. It's too inconvenient to believe in God. So they accept the first lunatic theory that comes down the pike, and they don't question it or doubt it, right? So that's the purpose of this, So, or another theory that he's not dead, swoon theory, or he escaped. Okay? And the question is, where did he escape to? Okay? So in the 1890s, there was a Russian historian, pseudo-historian, who went to Tibet, India, and Afghanistan, and he claims that he found scrolls, documents that say Jesus escaped and went to Tibet. He's actually a Buddhist, and he lived out his life in the Kashmir province of India. Okay? Now, is that true?
No.
Bart Ehrman, who is a New Testament scholar, who's an atheist from North Carolina, he's always on the news, he's on those Jesus shows you see on the History Channel. They always interview Bart Ehrman all the time. Even Bart Ehrman says this guy is like he made it up. Like George Santos, the guy from Long Island, the fabulist that makes stuff up. That's what this guy does. So did he escape to India? No. It's kind of like the same people would say something like, Hitler escaped and he's living in South America or Brazil. The boys from Brazil. Is that true? Hitler's not the kind of a guy, he has such a huge ego, he's not going to keep a low profile of growing cabbages in Brazil the rest of his life. Right? A guy like that would probably want to make headlines again.
Sure.
Right? So Jesus didn't just disappear and go to Kashmir and live quietly, in the underground economy or something. Right? So, okay, he's really dead. So we got the D down, right? Everybody agrees he's dead? Okay? Buried. Now, let's do, is he buried? Yes, he is. And we know the story of Joseph of Arimathea that begs for the body of Pilate, which is remarkable. He's placed in a tomb, not buried in the ground like we do it. And it's a tomb carved out of limestone with a slab. You place the body on there, you roll a stone in the front of it, and you come back 1 year later when the flesh is decayed, gather the bones, put the bones in an ossuary box. It's called being gathered unto your fathers. Is that real? There are literally thousands of ossuary boxes in the greater Jerusalem area. Right now we can go to a museum and see them. We have 3 of them at the Metropolitan Museum of Art down the road here, 100 miles away. So don't believe me, okay? So he's buried, right, in a rich man's tomb. And for a good measure, how do we know he was really buried in a rich man's tomb? Well, the Sanhedrin people in the temple said to Pilate, he's going to go around and tell people that he rose from the dead because he was saying that up in Galilee. We want a Roman guard to make sure his disciples don't steal the body. So the Romans stationed a guard at the tomb with a Roman seal on it. There's a big stone with a seal. All right, now, what is the penalty for breaking the Roman seal on a sealed tomb?
Death.
Yeah. Do the Romans, do they say, we'll let you out without bail? We'll send you for rehabilitation because I know that you have a drug problem or something. No, they'll just kill you. Okay? The Romans are really brutal about this. If they put a seal on a tomb and put a guard there, that means you don't go there. Well, wait a minute. Maybe the disciples are going to sneak up the middle of the night, overcome the guard, crack the seal open, and steal the dead body of Jesus, and then tell people that he rose from the dead. Is that a likely scenario? Are Romans tough?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty tough. Are you going to overcome a group of Navy SEALs or maybe a SWAT team right? You're gonna, you're gonna go there to overcome these people. You're fishermen, right? So it's an unlikely scenario. What's Occam's razor? It means the simplest argument takes the day or wins the argument. So if you have a convoluted story, if the more complicated the story, the more you know that it's not true. The simple thing is, yes, he was dead, placed in the tomb.
So,
Okay, go ahead.
Right. Pastor, I was just wondering, some places I've read that it was thought that it was the temple guards instead of the Roman guards.
Yeah, it
Is
doesn't,
true.
yeah, I think the Bible says that they posted a guard.
Oh, just a guard.
So it could have been the temple.
either way.
The temple guard would be the same thing. These are like really tough dudes that have, it'd be like the Capitol Police in Washington, D.C.
so the guard,
Like they're guarding the temple in Jerusalem.
the guard is not singular, it's plural.
Yeah, but they were, 5 or 6 guys on duty. And the tomb is sealed with a Roman seal. So in other words, the chances are very unlikely the apostles would have pulled off some kind of a, steal the body kind of a thing. Right? Or John Dominic Crossan, who is a person who's a real lunatic, who's on the Jesus shows on the History Channel that Christina watches all the time, right? You always interview John Dominic Crossan. He believes that Jesus was crucified and that his body was left to rot on the cross, and or it was taken down and thrown in a ditch and given a shallow grave, and it was devoured by dogs.
Oh my God.
Okay? Now, where does he get that from? Well, we know that Romans, when they crucify somebody, that's common. They would leave you on the cross, right? What's the location of the called Golgotha, the place of the skull? Why is that? Because there's bones and skulls laying all over the place. Because the bodies just rot off. The dogs eat, the crows devour it, and that sort of thing.
Who cares?
So what happened to the body of Jesus?
It's taken down by 2
We have the story that Joseph of Arimathea begged the body and took him down off the cross, which is not normal. That's why when you read the story, you'd be like, well, that's an odd thing. Okay? So it's not standard procedure. So therefore, we would say, well, yeah, it probably happened that way, because it's not something you would normally happen. But he just like makes it up, John Dominic Crossan. It sounds, okay?
It sells books.
Yeah, it sells books. Again, that's why these people are on these Jesus shows. They're not going to say to me, well, the Bible said it must be true. No, that's boring. They want to have some sensational thing. Bigfoot came, he landed from a UFO, and they took down the body of Jesus and they made up the Christian religion or something. That would make big news. Okay? So he's buried in the tomb. And, okay, here's a variation for this. If he's buried, right? He's buried, okay? Yes, Pastor Mark, he's buried in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. The question is, how did he get out of the grave? In other words, who moved the stone? What's the stone look like? I've actually been there. I've seen the tombs like this, and they have it looks like a big millstone. They weigh between 1.5 tons and 2 tons.
Right.
That's 4,000 pounds, right? Well, and they have a channel, and you have to get like crowbars and roll the stone in, and then they put a seal on it, and you want to do that to keep the tomb from being robbed or animals coming in and devouring the body. So you want to have that stone in front, and it's a Roman seal on top of it. So the question is, Jesus is in the tomb, 100 pounds of spices, he's all wrapped up like a mummy. Suddenly he wakes up early Sunday morning. What happened? Well, let me get out of this thing. Houdini gets out of the straitjacket. Then scrape off all the spices. Then, how do you move the stone from inside the tomb? Right? It's like you can't like press the button and it'll open. You have to have somebody on the outside with pry bars to roll it back up the channel in order for you to get out of the tomb. So how did he get out of it on his own? The answer is he didn't. I mean, that's not a plausible thing. Who moved the stone? Okay. Matthew 24 or 28:2 says that the angels moved the stone. So that explains that. All right. Now, so let's go. So the tomb he's in the tomb, and the tomb is empty. Okay? So now, what happened? How did the tomb get to be empty? Okay? First of all, maybe the disciples helped him escape. Okay, you need to have help to escape. Somebody has to move the stone. Or maybe the disciples stole the body. Matthew chapter 28, verse 3. I better read that to you. All right, after the Sabbath, this is 28 verse 1, at the dawn of the first day of the week, Sunday, Mary Magdalene and other Mary went to the tomb. There was a violent earthquake along the way. How did the stone get moved? For an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, he rolled back the stone and sat on it. Okay? So in other words, it wasn't like an inside job. Somebody on the outside, an angel, moved the stone. And the angel's appearance was white like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. I love that one. So the dead guy's in the tomb, but because of the resurrection, the people outside are dead, laying there like dead men, flopping around on the ground. Okay? And so the guards themselves would be hostile witnesses to the resurrection. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, no phobos, for I know that you were looking for Jesus who was crucified." Was he crucified? Yes. Was he really dead? That's why they put him in the tomb, because he was dead. He's not here. Why is he not here? He is risen. Okay? Just as he said. In other words, he's not here. Why? Because the disciples masterminded a conspiracy and stole the body. He's not here. Why not? Because Jesus didn't really die. He woke up, got out of the mummy wrapping, scraped off the spices, moved the stone, and left and went to Tibet. Now, see how preposterous that is? So Occam's razor, the tomb's empty because just like he said, come and see the place, right? Where he lay, right? Okay, now let me stop there for a second. Did the disciples steal the body? The answer is no. Why not? Well, they're not really psychologically prepared to do this, and they don't have weapons and so on. Okay, so so if the disciples didn't steal the body, who else stole the body? Maybe the Jews stole the body. Okay? Now, why would the temple elite people break into the tomb that they guarded and got the Romans to put a seal on? Why would they break in and steal the body? How would you end the Christian religion like that? Ta-da! Here's the dead body of Jesus. Right? He didn't rise from the dead. In fact, here it is. The corpus delicti. We got the dead body of Jesus. There it is. That would be the easiest way to end the Christian religion. Because without the resurrection of Christ, then Christian religion is it's silly. It's like why would you bother being a Christian? Okay? So did the Jews steal the body? No. All they'd have to do is produce the dead body, and that would the claim of the resurrection would be refuted. Or maybe the Romans stole the body. So who are the power groups? The disciples, the Romans, and the Jews. So one of the three had to be the group that stole the body if the body was stolen. Why would the Romans steal the body? Like, what's Pontius Pilate's big thing? To keep law and order and peace and quiet during the Passover time in Jerusalem. So, stealing the body of someone that you executed, in other words, you would have control over it anyway because you had the guard there. You could just take them out and, dispose of them somewhere. All you'd have to do, again, is to produce the body, and that would negate the whole thing. Or this one. It's a hallucination story that they imagine. It's a subjective experience. And I love this one because, we have a lot of people in this church, that were, around in the 1960s, love the one you're with, take LSD, like Timothy Leary from Millbrook, right? And what's wrong with that? Well, if you take LSD and have a hallucination, it's called subjective. In other words, it's in your head. Okay? Do 500 people who were witnesses to the risen Lord, do they have a collective hallucination? They all took LSD at the same time, and their hallucination was in complete harmony, and they all saw the same thing. That's ridiculous, right? So you can't get away with going, it was just a hallucination. When Mary Magdalene and the other women went to the tomb, they just imagined it. It was a hallucination. Now, if Mary Magdalene was there alone and had a hallucination, that might be plausible, but how many witnesses to convict somebody in the book of Deuteronomy? 2 witnesses, right? So there's 2 or more people that saw the empty tomb, okay? So the idea that it's a hallucination story is a ridiculous, that's a preposterous thing, okay? And we have, here, let's do a couple of these. Luke 20, let's do John, Luke 24, 42. Luke 24, Luke 24, 42. All right, this is a story when he appears to Saint Thomas. When Jesus had said, he showed them his hands and feet, wounds of Christ, and they still did not believe because of the joy and amazement. And Jesus said to them, do you have anything to eat? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and he ate it in their presence. Who's in the room? It's the 10 apostles plus Thomas, doubting Thomas, the 11. Judas is not there. So there's at least 11 people in the room. Again, is that a hallucination?
No.
No, because it's more than one person. Okay? So the hallucination story doesn't hold for that. Okay, next. He's buried, and the guards went AWOL, absent without leave. Okay? Now, Matthew chapter 27 actually deals with that question, which I think is kind of interesting. Matthew chapter 27, verse 15. I hope this is the right one now. It doesn't look like the right one. Let me do chapter 28. Okay, here we go. After the resurrection. So women hurried away with it. Now, chapter 28, verse 11. While the women were on their way back to the city, some guards went into the city of Jerusalem, and they reported to the chief priest in the Sanhedrin everything that had happened. In other words, they're the ones who were laying at the tomb as dead. Well, they woke up finally, and the tomb was empty, and they left. And when the chief priests had met with the elders to devise a plan, in other words, we have to do something to cover this up. The tomb was empty. The reports are that he rose from the dead. He appeared to these women. So they gave the soldiers a large sum of money. What does that mean? They bribed the guards. Hush money. Okay? And they told, and here's what you're supposed to say. The disciples came in the middle of the night and stole away the body while we were asleep. Stop. What happens to guards or temple police, you could say either way, that fall asleep when they're on duty?
Death.
Yeah, what they do, because you endanger the entire legion if you're a guard on duty, they light you up. Yeah, they pour flammables on you and light you on fire. And the people that get to watch this would say something like, I'll never fall asleep on guard duty. Look what they did to Jose over here. See how that works? So they bribed the guards to say that they fell asleep, which is like, that's a death penalty. If you really fell asleep on guard duty, you could be killed for that. I mean, that's like a weird, it doesn't make sense. Isn't that weird? Right? If this report gets to the governor, Pilate, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. In other words, we'll make sure Pilate doesn't kill you. Right? So the soldiers took the money, and they did as they were instructed, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews even to this day. Okay? So there are stories that the guards went AWOL, or they fell asleep, or they took a bribe. Okay? So is that a likely story? All right, here's the way conspiracies work. Did Lee Harvey Oswald conspire with Castro or rich businessmen gangsters from Chicago or business people to assassinate Kennedy December 22nd, 1963? Well, what's the date now? It's March 2024. Don't you think somebody would have come forward and go, yeah, I was at the meeting when Sam Giancana offered Lee Harvey Oswald $50,000 for doing a hit on John F. Kennedy that I hate, right? There's no conspiracies in the long run. The truth always comes out, right? The fact that they can't find anyone who's willing to come up and go, I participated in the conspiracy, or I heard somebody conspiring, or, you know, see how that works? So this thing, if you can't produce a guard who says, yeah, we took a bribe and we made the whole thing up, well then it's just a story. Historically, it's not an accurate story. You can have a theory, but a theory is not the same as a fact, okay? But a lot of people would rather believe a myth or a story than believe the facts that are there. Here's another one. He's buried in the tomb, but the women went to the wrong tomb. Okay? I love this one, right? Mrs. Isaacs, that's why we have GPS on our iPhone, because when we go down to see the Baberman, the granddaughter in Somers, we have to have the right directions, because you don't want to go to the wrong house. Go to the wrong house to pick up the wrong granddaughter. Wait a minute, this isn't Somers, this is White Plains. Is that plausible? The women, right, they witnessed Joseph of Arimathea placing the body of Jesus in the tomb. Would you forget from Friday night sundown to Easter Sunday morning, like that's 3 days, 2 days, would you forget where the tomb of a loved one was? You know where the person's buried, right? So they went to the wrong tomb. That's why the tomb was empty, okay? What does Matthew, I don't have my glasses, look at Matthew 27.
65 to 66.
Matthew 27, 6.
61. It's squished together.
I don't have my glasses.
I don't either.
65 to
So here, so 61
Go
is,
down here.
Well, you can read it better than I can.
well, I have my glasses. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there sitting opposite the sepulchre. That?
Okay, stop. Mary Magdalene and the other two witnesses were sitting opposite the sepulchre. Okay, so in other words, they knew the location. Okay? Excellent. Okay, so it's the wrong tomb? No, it's the right tomb. Again, all you have to do, if it was the wrong tomb, well, then you go to the right tomb, you roll away the stone, you take out the dead body, and you go, here's the right tomb, and here's the dead body of Jesus. Case closed. They didn't do that. Okay? So, what does that mean? You're stuck with this. The resurrection. There's no other option. Okay? So, the resurrection, there are 10 recorded New Testament appearances during the 40 days between Easter and Ascension. Recorded.
Yeah.
That means there are other ones that aren't written down. The 11th one would be Jesus appears to Paul like 3 or 4 years later on the road to Damascus. Right? He meets the risen Lord. So the resurrection. And what happened with the resurrection? It changed the lives of the apostles. Right? If it wasn't true, and again, suppose the disciples stole the body and made it all up. Okay. What happened to the 11 surviving apostles? We know Judas hanged himself after betraying Jesus. What happened to the other 11?
They were martyred.
They're all martyred except John of Patmos. John, who wrote John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John of Revelation.
The one that Jesus loved.
He was exiled to Patmos, which is worse than death, and you rot on the island, right? With no friends and no associate, no food, right? You're marooned on a desert island. All of them died martyr's death. St. Andrew is crucified on a cross shaped like an X. St. Peter is crucified on a cross upside down. St. Thomas was killed by a spear, according to tradition, by a Hindu fanatic in India. Right? I visited the tomb of St. Thomas at Madras. Pretty neat, huh?
It's in India.
Yes, in India. But it's sort of like wink, wink, you know.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know? But all the tradition is that all of them died as martyrs. Did any of them go, wait a minute, before you stick me with the spear as a Hindu fanatic, I'd just like to say one thing. We made it all up. It's a joke. Yeah, no, he was really dead. We stole the body and we hid it somewhere. We made up this fabulous story about the resurrection, and here I am in India. How do you get from Jerusalem to India? You just fly there? No, you like walk there. Is that sort of dangerous?
Yeah.
You'd have to be a lunatic to do this, right? South India, you'd be killed by tribesmen and warlords and all kinds of it'd be a perilous journey, and you're doing this because you made it all up. So no, none of them ever recanted. And martyr means witness. Okay, so they witnessed they met the risen Lord, changed their life. They went on the road. They took the gospel all over the world, and none of them ever recanted. That alone is a very powerful thing, and it changed their lives. Right?
And they were successful too.
I think they were. I mean, the reason we're Christian today is because they spread the gospel all over the Mediterranean and then up into Europe, Northern European people. We were doing human sacrifices, and we were polytheistic people, Germanic tribes, right? So the people that lived in darkness have seen a great light. We became Christian because of that. Yeah.
There have been probably hundreds or thousands of miracles.
Yeah.
Who's studying those? Is there a large study on that?
Miracles are, to me, any miracle that's not in the Bible is very interesting. But it's like angels. Are angels interesting? Yeah. But is your salvation dependent on the belief of angels? No. It's an interesting thing. Are miracles interesting? Yeah. The 3 peasant children at Fatima, and the Virgin Mary appears to them and gives them a secret scroll that the Pope unrolls in 1960 or something. And that's interesting stuff. Our Lady of Lourdes, yeah, that's great. I'd go there if I had a chance. But I mean, my faith isn't based on, the miraculous medal of whatever, or Our Lady of Fatima, the message. Every message I need is in the New Testament. The other stuff is interesting, but it's like, it's okay, I'd go if I could, That's probably a bad attitude about it, but, I mean, it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
If somebody says to me, I had cancer, the cancer went away, it's a miracle, hey, that's great.
That is.